Welcome back to Andersen Acres. Today we're talking about something that isn't quite as fun as splashing ducks or collecting eggs, but it's really important if you're raising waterfowl. We're diving into a disease called Colibacillosis, caused by an E. coli bacteria, one strain of E. coli bacteria. Don't worry, we're going to break down what it is, how it affects ducks, and what signs to look for, and most importantly, how you can prevent it, or at least try to prevent it, on your own farm. So, Colibacillosis is one of the most common bacterial infections in poultry worldwide. It's caused by a strain of E. coli, the same family of bacteria people sometimes talk about when we're talking about food safety. Now, not all E. coli is dangerous. Okay, let's be very clear. Not all E. coli is dangerous. Some strains live in the intestines of animals and people without causing problems. But the harmful strains can lead to infections. And in ducks, that often means yolk sac infections in newly hatched ducklings or septicemia, a fancy word for when bacteria gets into the bloodstream. There goes some ducks now. Now, ducklings are especially vulnerable. They can pick up E. coli right after hatching if their environment isn't clean or if the eggs were contaminated. Once it enters their system, the bacteria can travel fast. Sometimes it starts with a yolk sac infection where the last bit of yolk they absorb after hatching doesn't really get digested properly because of the bacteria. Other times, the bacteria invade the bloodstream, leading to a much more serious, often fatal condition. Older ducks aren't necessarily immune either. Stress, overcrowding, poor air quality, or damp, dirty bedding can all make them more susceptible. So, what does E. coli look like in your ducks? Well, in ducklings, you might see weakness or poor growth or sudden death, a swollen tummy, so their abdomen could be swollen if the yolk sac is infected, watery or really sticky droppings, especially if they stick to their butt, respiratory problems like coughing, sneezing, or even labored breathing. In older ducks, symptoms can include weight loss, fewer eggs than you were expecting, or respiratory signs that look a lot like other diseases but aren't other diseases. So the tricky part is it can mimic a lot of different problems. So diagnosis usually means a veterinarian or a lab test, because it's the only way if you know it's E. coli is by testing, because so many duck diseases look the same. So in order to know what it is and how to treat it, you're probably going to need a vet to run a couple of lab tests. And hopefully you never get to that point. Hopefully your ducks are never sick enough to have to worry about it, but it happens. So what can you do about it? Well, sanitation. Good sanitation goes a long way in preventing E. coli infections in the first place. Ducks are messy birds. Let's get that out of the way. Ducks are messy, messy, messy. They splash in their water, they truck mud into their bedding, and they love to poop right where they sleep. If you're not on top of cleaning, that damp, dirty environment becomes the perfect breeding ground for E. coli. Clean water, dry bedding, and proper ventilation are your first line of defense, okay? Keep waters clean, keep bedding dry, and make sure you have plenty of ventilation in your duck house. Remember, ventilation is important for all animals. Don't have a breeze right on your ducks. Have it above their heads so things can escape and so wind can move the air back and forth. Preferably have vents across from each other so that airflow keeps going. That can save their lives. It might not be glamorous, but ventilation saves lives. So get on that ventilation. Other practical steps you can take to prevent an E. coli infection in your very beautiful ducks. First, you want to clean your brooders daily when raising ducklings. Disinfect between hatches. Okay? So don't put a batch in with a batch in with a batch. Stop. Get the old ducklings out of there. Clean it up. Disinfect it. Put new ducklings in. That way, if one group of ducklings had something, you're not immediately infecting the new ducklings, okay? Disinfect between batches. You want to change water often. Ducks soil their water fast, okay? Fresh water reduces bacteria growth. So take that dirty water, dump it out, clean the containers, fill them up again. It is a lot of work, yes. That's why ducks are more work than chickens, because of the stinking water issue. And I do mean stinking water. After a few minutes of ducks playing in it and pooping in it, it doesn't smell so good. Now, dry bedding is also crucial. Wet litter is a huge carrier of disease. It's a hotbed for bacteria, especially E. coli. You need to get that wet bedding out of there, put dry bedding down. And avoid overcrowding. Too many ducks in a small space leads to stress and higher disease risk. Make sure you handle those eggs carefully as well. If you're hatching your own eggs, you want to keep your incubators clean, because bacteria can sneak in before the ducklings even hatch. And clean your incubators, give them a good wipe down between batches of eggs so you're not making anybody sick. Okay? You also want to work with your vet if you have repeated outbreaks. Your vet can help you find out what's going on and how to treat it. Sometimes antibiotics are used, yes, but prevention is much more effective than relying on treatment. So if you're having repeated problems, get your vet out and have a discussion about what you can do differently in order to not have so many recurring problems. Okay? Don't be afraid to get them out, get their advice, and they'll probably tell you it's ventilation and wet bedding, because that's a lot of times what it is. Now, E. coli isn't just a backyard problem. It is a major concern for big poultry operations, the big commercial ones as well. But here on the homestead, it really comes down to giving your ducks the healthiest environment possible. Strong, well-cared-for ducks are much more resistant to infections if the bacteria does show up. There goes the turkey. So think of it kind of like building up their defenses by taking care of the basics. Clean food, clean water, good ventilation, and plenty of space to move about. Lots of sunshine, fresh air. Sunshine and fresh air will prevent a lot of problems. You'd be surprised at how many problems we can prevent just by making sure all of our animals have access to nice sunlight and fresh air every single day. It really cuts down. That's why we have so few problems. That's literally the answer to when somebody asks, well, why do you have so few problems and a lot of other places seem to have more problems? Our animals are out of the mud, so they're not in the muck. Keep them out of the muck, keep them out in the sun, make sure they have plenty of fresh air. That really solves so many of your problems. So do those 3 things. Okay? Get them out of the mud. That's one of the reasons Shadowfax is so often up here when I'm filming, because we want him out of the mud. It's not muddy now, it's nice and dry. But get them out of the mud, plenty of good ventilation, plenty of sunlight and fresh air. Okay? Those things will solve so many problems, including helping you ward off E. coli infections, because E. coli can't thrive if it doesn't have somewhere to grow. So keep it from growing by keeping all the dampness at bay, and have your animals have plenty of exercise, plenty of fresh air and sunlight. That'll solve a lot of it. That's about it for me here today at Andersen Acres. I hope this gives you a clear picture of what E. coli in ducks is, how it affects your ducks, and most importantly, how you can prevent it. Have you ever dealt with an illness in your flock? Drop a comment below and let us know what worked or what didn't on your farm. Thanks for joining me. We'll see you tomorrow.